The silence of the archive repository was not absolute, but engineered. It was a dense, cool quiet, perpetually maintained by the relentless low-frequency hum of the climate control systems that regulated the air and preserved the centuries of institutional memory stored within the vault's deeper levels. The room itself, designated Review Chamber Alpha 7, was a study in functional sterility. Pale green cinder block walls met a polished linoleum floor, reflecting the severe, shadowless light of recessed fluorescent panels. This environment, designed to neutralize organic decay, inadvertently amplified the tension held by the 4 individuals seated around the central fixture. That fixture was a long, heavy steel table, unblemished and cold to the touch, upon which rested the material focus of a decade-long struggle for clarity. 5 standard-issue archival boxes. They were heavy, constructed of double-walled, acid-free cardboard reinforced with dull brass corner protectors. Each box was sealed not only with tamper-evident tape bearing the unbroken seal of the Internal Oversight Directorate, but also secured by thick hemp-like twine, wrapped and knotted with a precision that bespoke institutional procedure. The anticipation in the room was a palpable weight, pressing down on the silence, measured against the slow sweep of the wall clock. These 5 containers, marked sequentially from File 1 through File 5, represented the culmination of an exhaustive inquiry into financial irregularities and systemic accountability failures that had defined the preceding governmental cycle. The official release was unprecedented, demanded by legislative mandate and sealed by judicial order. The team present, 2 legal analysts, a forensic document specialist, and a security liaison, were under oath, operating under protocols dictating every movement, every note taken, and every moment of observation. The first ritual involved the breaking of the seals. The forensic specialist, Dr. Eris Thorne, approached the boxes with white cotton gloves, utilizing a razor-sharp ceramic knife to sever the twine without damaging the cardboard beneath. Utilizing a razor-sharp ceramic knife to sever the twine without damaging the cardboard beneath. The sound of the twine snapping, dry and sudden, echoed in the chamber. The reinforced lids were lifted one by one, releasing the immediate, undeniable sensory signature of deep storage.
It was a scent that was at once musty and dry, an exhalation of paper dust, ancient ink, and the slightly metallic tang of the stable air in the vault below.
It was the smell of secrets preserved too long. Within each box lay hundreds of documents, organized and indexed, bundled loosely with frayed string, or secured by tarnished brass fasteners. The paper itself was cream-colored, brittle at the edges, reflecting the poor quality of the materials available during the period of documentation. The objective for the first phase of review was baseline verification, checking the index against the physical reality, ensuring continuity, and establishing the standard for what a complete file should look like. File 1, designated the Control Log and Communications Register, was examined first. It was voluminous, spanning 19 bound subsections. Dr. Thorne methodically flipped through the pages, the sound a continuous, dry rustling. The numeric sequences ran unbroken, page 001 to page 893. The content consisted mainly of transcribed telephone logs, low-level memoranda concerning supply chain logistics, and scheduling directives. The uniformity was initially reassuring. Aside from the predictable presence of standard administrative redactions, names of low-level staff or minor vendor pricing obscured by thin, precise lines of blue ballpoint pen, the file was structurally intact. It established the institutional standard of documentation, chronological order, sequential numbering, and legible, if bureaucratic, content. File 4, the second file chosen for comparison, focused on peripheral regulatory oversight. This file, too, passed initial verification.
Its 612 pages contain detailed quarterly reports, audits performed by external third-party agencies, and correspondence concerning compliance milestones. Though tedious in its detail, it confirmed the existence of robust procedural documentation during the period under inquiry. The initial optimism, based on the apparent transparency of these two auxiliary files, was cautious but present. The system, it seemed, had complied. The transition occurred with the opening of File 2.
This box contained the highly anticipated interdepartmental allocation summaries. The documents expected to detail the movement of funds between the primary operative body and its designated shadow entities.
The anticipation in the room sharpened. The legal analysts leaned closer to the steel table, adjusting the placement of their logbooks.
The first section of File 2 maintained the established standard: dense tables of contents, introductory memorandums, and the requisite official stamps. The sequential numbering began cleanly, advancing from 001 to 045. Then, the expectation fractured. The document following page 045 was page 073. The realization was not immediate, but creeping. Dr. Thorne stopped the methodical turning, his gloved fingers hovering over the paper. "Stop," whispered one of the analysts, adjusting his spectacles. There is a gap. Pages 46 through 72. 27 pages. This was not a mistake of indexing. The original binding string for this subsection remained, but the pages between the two surviving sheets had been surgically severed. The cut edge was not jagged or torn by carelessness. It was clean, precise, consistent with the use of a professional paper guillotine. The excision had been done with purpose, separating the remaining pages only slightly above the line of the binding holes, leaving only thin filaments of the original paper stock embedded within the string binding itself. The content of the missing section was immediately known from the file's index: Q3 Internal Resource Migration Logs. These logs were the granular data detailing the timing and recipients of fund transfers, the exact mechanism that the entire inquiry was predicated upon uncovering. What remained was a procedural vacuum. The flow of documentation moved directly from the establishment of the general fund structure, page 045, to the discussion of the fund's subsequent expenditure oversight, page 073, bypassing entirely the act of transfer itself. The silence that returned to Chamber Alpha 7 was no longer engineered by air conditioning. It was the silence of acute, chilling realization. The initial compliance was, structurally, a form of misdirection. The examination of File 3 confirmed that the excision in File 2 was not an isolated error, but a systematic approach. File 3 contained the highly critical executive correspondence and directive protocols, believed to house the direct orders issued by high-ranking officials to implement the controversial policies. The physical format of File 3 was slightly different: heavier cardstock, printed in a deep cobalt blue ink, indicating higher classification status. The first 110 pages offered detailed, generalized policy statements, verbose and opaque, confirming only that protocols were established and directives were issued. At the center of the third binder, the review team encountered the first major, deliberate omission. It was a card, thick and heavyweight, cut precisely to the size of the archival paper. It was brilliant, bleached white, a startling absence of color against the brittle cream hue of the surrounding documentation. This was not a temporary marker. It was a permanent, custom-made placeholder. On the face of this thick white card, stamped in regulation black ink, were 4 lines. Excised under Authority Directive 7A. Classification status: permanent retention. Contents deemed vital to national security continuity. This single dense card carried the weight of 27 missing pages of direct executive correspondence. The thickness of the card made it physically heavier than the stack of papers it represented,
giving it an unnerving, substantial presence. Dr. Thorne ran his thumb across its surface. It was smooth, almost glossy, resisting the musty atmosphere of the repository. It stood in the center of the narrative like a physical negation, a pure, aggressive void. The designation permanent retention was the legal phrasing used to justify the removal of documents deemed too sensitive to even acknowledge being missing. Yet here it was, the acknowledgement itself, institutionalized on the stark white card. The contents of these 27 pages, according to the official index, which itself remained, included the Implementation Directive for Sensitive Operation Gamma and authorization signatures for primary resource deployment. These were the smoking gun documents, the linkage between command and execution. The placeholder card severed the chain entirely, turning the operation into a self-generating occurrence, devoid of human agency or official initiation. The psychological impact of the card was more profound than the simple numerical gap found in File 2. The card was institutional cruelty materialized, an official artifact designed not to confuse, but to clarify the fact of intentional concealment. It was not sloppy omission. It was meticulous, officially sanctioned darkness. File 5 proved to be the most structurally intact, yet the most profoundly violated in terms of content. File 5 was dedicated entirely to financial subsidies and external stakeholder designations.
Unlike the excisions of File 2 and File 3, the pages in File 5 were all present, page 001 through page 458.
The systemic destruction here was achieved not by removal, but by obliteration. The method was the redaction. The ink utilized was not the standard administrative black marker sometimes seen covering minor details. This was an industrial-grade obscurant, a substance of such density that it appeared matte obsidian, absorbing all light. The strokes were broad, relentless, and professionally applied, likely by a pressurized tool or a custom stencil, ensuring total coverage. The redactions were aimed specifically at two critical categories of information. First, the financial summaries. Entire columns of numerical data, the precise sums transferred, the dates of transaction, the account numbers, had been drowned beneath vast, rectangular blocks of black ink. The sheer scale of the redaction suggested not just the hiding of sensitive data, but the complete erasure of the financial topography of the operation. In one instance, a page detailing the allocation of funds to 4 different shell corporations was 70% covered in the obsidian substance, leaving only the introductory headers and the official footer visible. The black squares stood proud on the brittle cream paper, stark evidence of targeted blindness.
The second category targeted was personnel. In sections listing key stakeholder designations, the identity of every single individual above a certain bureaucratic pay grade had been systematically annihilated.
A list of 43 names, each preceded by a title, Director, Oversight Committee Member, Chief Strategist, was now a corresponding list of 43 black rectangles. The titles remained: Chief Strategist, redacted; Director of Operations, redacted. The irony was acute. The documents confirmed the existence of these roles and the importance of these individuals, but rendered them functionally anonymous, insulating them from accountability. The connection between the action, detailed in the non-redacted explanatory paragraphs, and the actor, the obliterated name, was severed. The chain of cause and effect had been systematically dismantled by the broad stroke of the brush. The density of the redaction ink was such that it bled slightly through the thin paper stock. When Dr. Thorne held a redacted page up to the light, the outline of the black shape was visible on the reverse side, a permanent stain saturating the fibers. It was a physical impression of censorship, designed to prevent any attempt at light table forensic recovery of the underlying text.
The collective impact of the systematic mutilation
across the critical files 2, 3, and 5 was the creation of a ghost narrative. The review team had received documentation confirming that a major operation had occurred. Files 1 and 4 offered background, that money had been allocated, File 5 showed the headings, and that senior personnel were involved. File 5 showed the titles. But the critical linkages, who ordered it, missing pages in File 3, how much was spent and where it went, redactions in File 5, and when the actual transfers took place, excisions in File 2, were entirely removed. The resulting archive was a meticulously sculpted illusion of transparency. It gave the public the shape of the truth without any of its substance. It provided procedural accountability without personal accountability. The legal analysts began the arduous process of logging the omissions. This required forensic precision. For every missing sequence, they had to record the original document index title, the numerical gap, the physical evidence of excision, the clean cut, and the precise justification cited. Directive 7A, permanent retention. In the case of the redactions in File 5, the team had to measure and log the dimensions of the obscuring ink blocks.
One analyst noted the standardized size of the blocks covering financial figures, 1.2 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters, consistent across hundreds of entries, suggesting a machine-guided application rather than manual use of a marker pen.
This procedural uniformity pointed toward an institutionalized high-level process of sanitization.
This was not a panicked cover-up. It was a deliberate, layered operation of counterintelligence applied to the institution's own records.
The documentary evidence provided a narrative frame that protected the mechanisms and actors responsible for the most sensitive actions. What was left were the bureaucratic consequences, the tertiary effects, and the low-level administrative overhead. The remaining text described the management of the cleanup operation, the filing of the requisite compliance forms, and the generalized policy framework, the symptoms of the action, but never the disease itself. The question that hung heavy in the sterile air was procedural. When did the excisions occur? The physical state of the paper, the brittle, aged quality, the embedded paper fragments in the binding, suggested the original documents were old. However, the placeholder card in File 3 was startlingly new, its white stock unnaturally clean. This implied a two-stage process. The initial excisions may have occurred closer to the time of the event, but the official, institutionalized justification and the creation of the placeholder artifact were recent. Mandated, perhaps, by the very judicial order that forced this release. This indicated that the system had not simply failed to keep records, it had actively reviewed, confirmed the gaps, and then manufactured official tokens, like the white card, to legitimize those gaps in the face of public scrutiny. The act of presentation was the final layer of control. Dr. Thorne, specializing in the texture and age of documents, focused particularly on the integrity of the remaining pages adjacent to the excisions in File 2. The paper there was slightly more stressed, consistent with being pulled apart. He noted microscopic tearing marks extending slightly beyond the clean cut line, suggesting the documents were cut while still bound, and then carefully separated. He compared the density of the black ink in File 5 again, noting the slight chemical odor released when the page was gently flexed, a characteristic of certain industrial polymer inks used for high-speed stamping operations. This ink was not standard office supply. It was engineered for permanence and opacity. The intent was absolute erasure. The resulting assessment was stark. The government entity responsible for maintaining these records had effectively created a legal paradox. They had complied with the order to release the records, fulfilling the letter of the transparency law. But by utilizing legal frameworks, such as Directive 7A, and physical acts of omission and redaction, they had rendered the released content functionally useless for its stated purpose, establishing specific accountability. The documents, hundreds of pages thick, were physically present, heavy and real. Yet, they offered only a ghost-like narrative. The core truth, the linkage between the powerful and the controversial operation, remained suspended in an impenetrable, officially sanctioned darkness. The cold, bright silence of Review Chamber Alpha 7 bore witness not to transparency, but to the meticulous engineering of a perfect, bureaucratic void. The true content remained secured, perhaps forever, behind walls of obsidian ink and pristine white cardstock. The cost of institutional self-preservation had been precisely measured and implemented, page by surgical page. The 5 files had been released, but the truth remained captive.